The forgotten path, the air was cool and gentle, carrying with it the faint fragrance of jasmine as Clara wandered down the quiet countryside road. She had been visiting her grandmother's old cottage for the first time in many years, a place tucked away on the edge of a forest where time seemed to stand still. The moon hung low, pale and luminous, painting the world in shades of silver. Clara had intended to head inside for the night, but something stirred within her, a curious pull, as though the evening itself whispered her name and beckoned her forward. Her feet slowed, then shifted toward a narrow, half-hidden trail she barely remembered from childhood. The path was overgrown, veiled by tall grass and draping branches that swayed lazily in the night breeze. She hesitated at first, unsure if it was safe to follow, but the thought of discovery outweighed her doubt. Each step she took sent little crunches of leaves into the stillness, yet instead of unsettling her, the sound felt oddly comforting, like the forest was acknowledging her return. Fireflies glimmered in and out of the shadows, their tiny lanterns flickering in a rhythm that seemed almost intentional, as if guiding her deeper into the unknown. With each breath, the air grew sweeter, tinged with a fragrance she couldn't quite name. As she walked further, the trail began to look strangely familiar, as though her younger self had wandered here long ago. A flash of memory tugged at her, running after her grandmother on this very path, her laughter echoing as she tried to keep up. Clara remembered her grandmother's voice saying something about a special place that revealed itself only to those who believed in its magic. Back then, Clara thought it was just a bedtime tale meant to make walks more exciting. But now, alone in the hush of night, that memory felt alive again, tugging at her heart with quiet insistence. Soon, the trees arched higher above her, forming a canopy of intertwined branches that filtered the moonlight into silver webs. A hush deeper than before settled in the air, and even the crickets seemed to fall silent. Clara paused, her hand brushing against the bark of an ancient oak, and realized she had stumbled into a place she couldn't quite name. The fragrance had grown stronger, floral yet strange, carrying notes of warmth and mystery. It was unlike any flower she had known, stirring a sense of awe and longing deep inside her chest. The path ahead shimmered faintly, as though touched by starlight that the sky itself couldn't claim. Her heart quickened as she saw it at last, a faint glow beyond the thicket, soft and inviting, like lanterns hidden behind leaves. She pushed through, branches bending as though willingly parting for her, until she emerged into a small clearing. There, she gasped softly. Before her stretched a hidden garden, bathed in the tender glow of moonlight and filled with blossoms she had never seen before. Their petals were radiant, glowing faintly as if they were painted with light itself. The entire garden shimmered as though alive, breathing with the rhythm of the night. Clara stood still, her breath caught in wonder, knowing she had stepped into something extraordinary. The blooming glow Clara lingered at the garden's edge, her breath soft and shallow as though she feared to disturb the silence. The flowers before her glowed with a light both delicate and unearthly, each bloom seeming to pulse gently in rhythm with the night air. Some blossoms gleamed in silvers and blues, while others radiated soft pinks and purples, their hues shifting whenever she tilted her head. It was as if moonlight itself had taken root and sprouted into living forms. For a long moment, Clara stood motionless, her body tingling with a mixture of awe and disbelief, uncertain whether she had stepped into reality or a dream. The longer she gazed, the more she realized each flower carried its own presence, as though alive in ways beyond the ordinary. A bell-shaped bloom swayed despite the still air, its petals trembling as if acknowledging her. Another, shaped like a star, slowly unfurled before her eyes, releasing a shimmering dust that vanished almost instantly into the night. Clara leaned closer, her senses overwhelmed by the heady perfume, soft, sweet, and layered with notes she could not name, each inhalation deepening her calm. She felt her worries peeling away, replaced with a profound serenity that seemed to settle into her very bones. Drawn forward, she stepped carefully into the clearing, her shoes sinking into moss that glowed faintly beneath her feet. The earth felt warm, alive, as though welcoming her. Every step revealed more wonders. Vines that sparkled like strands of silver thread, tiny blossoms no larger than pearls lighting her way, and great flowers with petals so wide they seemed to hold the stars within their folds. The deeper she walked, the more she noticed a subtle harmony filling the air, a hum, almost musical, though no instrument she knew could make such a sound. It was not a song, exactly, but the feeling of a lullaby hidden within the earth itself. Pausing in the center of the garden, Clara tilted her head to the sky, expecting to see stars, but the canopy above had changed. The branches no longer looked like ordinary trees. They shimmered faintly, their leaves dusted with light as if dipped in silver dew. The night sky seemed woven into their crowns, blurring the line between heaven and earth. For the first time in years, Clara felt like a child again, standing on the threshold of a world far greater than her own, where magic wasn't something imagined but something that breathed around her. Her heart swelled, and a soft smile touched her lips as she whispered, "Grandmother was right." Just as she spoke, a single flower nearby responded. Its petals, wide and pale as moonstone, folded open with slow, graceful movements until its glowing center was revealed. Clara stepped closer, her breath catching, for at the heart of the bloom was a pool of liquid light, shimmering like melted stars. The hum around her deepened, vibrating softly through her skin. She felt, without knowing how, that the garden was listening, that these night flowers were not merely plants, but guardians of something ancient. A faint shiver ran down her spine, equal parts wonder and anticipation, as if she were on the verge of being invited into a secret no one else had ever heard. The whispering petals Clara knelt before the glowing bloom, her fingertips hovering just above its petal as though she feared breaking its spell. The liquid light at its center shimmered like a mirror made of stars, rippling slightly, though no breeze stirred it. She leaned closer, and for an instant thought she saw her reflection, but it was not quite her own. The image smiled faintly back, warmer and older, carrying a tenderness that stirred memories she could not fully place. Before she could reach out, the surface rippled again and dissolved into radiant light, leaving Clara trembling with wonder and unease. The air shifted, and Clara noticed the flowers nearest to her beginning to turn, their faces angling as if they were following her every movement. Their petals quivered in unison, a hush falling so deep that she swore the entire clearing was listening. Then came the faintest sound, soft as a sigh, a whisper woven from the garden itself. It was not a voice in the air, but something inside her mind, gentle and melodic. She could not make out words, but the tone carried comfort, like the way her grandmother once hummed to lull her into sleep. Clara's breath caught, her chest tightening with an ache both sweet and sorrowful. Gathering her courage, she whispered into the stillness, "Who's there?" Her voice felt fragile, barely strong enough to break the silence. For a long moment, no reply came, and Clara feared she had imagined everything. But then a cluster of smaller blossoms stirred, their glow brightening in pulses, almost like a heartbeat. The whisper returned, clearer now, not a voice she could name, but a presence brushing against her thoughts. It spoke not in words, but in feelings, warmth, welcome, reassurance. Clara's fear softened, though she did not understand how. She knew she was not alone in this hidden garden. Drawn by instinct, Clara moved toward a patch of flowers shaped like lanterns, their pale blue light flickering softly. As she approached, they opened wider, releasing a faint mist that sparkled as it drifted around her. The scent carried notes of lavender and rain-soaked earth, filling her with a peace so deep her eyelids grew heavy. She fought the urge to close them, and instead let her fingers graze one of the blossoms. The instant her skin touched the petal, the mist swirled upward, curling into shapes that flickered like fragments of memory. Her grandmother's laughter, the warmth of summer evenings, the sound of her name spoken with love. Clara gasped quietly, tears stinging her eyes that in that moment, a shape began to take form among the flowers. It was not solid, but woven of mist and light, fragile yet radiant, as though the night itself were trying to remember a face. Clara froze, her heart thundering, yet her fear was edged with awe. The form wavered gently, and though it had no clear features, it felt unmistakably familiar. She could not say why, but she was certain the garden was trying to give her something, a presence, a guide, perhaps even a fragment of the grandmother she had loved and lost. The whisper filled her mind once more, this time carrying a single word, soft and steady as breath. "Welcome." The guardian of light. Clara's heart beat like a drum in the stillness as she stared at the shimmering form before her. It wavered like smoke caught in moonlight, yet there was a steadiness in the way it seemed to hold itself, as though it had always been waiting for her. The mist around it glowed with hues of pearl and silver, weaving in and out of shape, sometimes resembling a person, sometimes a mere outline of light. Though its face was indistinct, Clara felt the weight of its gaze, gentle, watchful, and strangely familiar. For a moment, she wanted to step forward and embrace it, but something told her to wait, to listen. The garden's hum deepened, low and resonant, vibrating through the ground and into her bones. The figure extended what looked like an arm, and nearby flowers blossomed wider in response, sending out streams of glowing pollen that drifted toward Clara like tiny stars. She reached out her hand instinctively, and as the glowing motes brushed her skin, warmth spread through her fingertips. It wasn't ordinary warmth, it was a memory. She saw herself at 6 years old, sitting in her grandmother's lap, hearing a bedtime story about a hidden garden where night itself blooms. The memory was sharp, alive, as though she had stepped back into that moment. Tears welled again, but this time they felt like a gift, not sorrow. The shimmering figure seemed to sense her reaction, for the mist brightened and swirled closer, surrounding her in a tender glow. The whispering presence entered her mind once more, clearer now, though still not spoken in words. Instead, it was a tide of feelings, reassurance, belonging, and a soft reminder of something she had almost forgotten: courage. Clara closed her eyes, breathing deeply, letting the feelings flow through her. When she opened them, the figure leaned closer, and though it had no distinct features, she swore she saw her grandmother's eyes shining in the glow. Clara whispered, barely audible, "Are are you really here?" Her voice trembled like a child's, fragile yet full of yearning. The figure did not reply with words, but its glow pulsed gently, like a heart beating. The flowers swayed though no wind touched them, and the garden itself seemed to lean closer, as if sharing in the answer. Clara realized then that it did not matter whether this was truly her grandmother or a guardian born of the night flowers. What mattered was that she was not alone, that something here recognized her, welcomed her, and perhaps had been waiting for her return all along. Just as the thought settled into her, the figure began to fade. The mist unraveled into threads of silver light that drifted upward, dissolving among the glowing blossoms. Yet instead of despair, Clara felt an odd calm, as if the figure had not left but simply merged back into the garden itself. The hum softened into a quiet lull, and the flowers bent slightly toward her, like companions bowing in approval. She stood very still, hand pressed over her heart, and whispered into the fragrant air, "I'll stay a while." The words lingered softly, carried by the night, as the path deeper into the garden glimmered faintly, waiting to be followed. The path of living petals. Clara lingered a moment longer in the place where the glowing figure had vanished, her hand still resting against her heart. The hum of the garden had quieted, settling into something more subtle, like the faint sound of a lullaby carried through a dream. She inhaled deeply, the air rich with the perfume of blossoms, and then turned her gaze toward the faintly shimmering path ahead. It seemed to invite her forward, not with urgency, but with gentle patience, like a hand outstretched for her to take when she was ready. She stepped carefully, her shoes pressing into the moss, which brightened faintly with each touch as though recording her passage. The path curved beneath arching stems and vines, their blossoms dangling like lanterns in shades of soft violet and pale gold. Some opened as she passed, releasing faint puffs of glowing dust that rose slowly into the air, creating drifting constellations that danced in the dark. She reached out to brush one cluster with her fingers, and the petals quivered at her touch, releasing a note so soft it was almost inaudible. Startled, she paused, then realized what she was hearing. The flowers were singing. Each bloom released its own delicate tone, and together they created a harmony that followed her footsteps, rising and falling in quiet waves of sound. Clara slowed, allowing the melody to surround her. The longer she listened, the more her thoughts quieted, as if the flowers were smoothing away the restless edges of her mind. She felt no fear, no pressing need to explain the magic before her. Instead, she walked as if in a dream, each step carrying her further into the heart of something ancient and sacred. The path itself seemed alive, leading her not through the garden as a stranger, but as a guest who had finally come home. She smiled faintly, thinking of her grandmother's stories, and wondered if perhaps the garden had always been here, waiting just beyond the veil of ordinary days. The flora grew stranger and more magnificent the further she traveled. She passed great, spiraling blossoms shaped like seashells, their inner folds glowing with deep sapphire light. Small, delicate buds clung to the moss at her feet, flickering like candles whenever she came near. A cluster of tall flowers leaned above her head, their petals translucent, glowing like panes of stained glass, casting colored patterns across her arms as she walked beneath them. Clara marveled at every detail, the way each bloom seemed to carry its own personality, its own voice in the quiet symphony of the night. She felt as though she were walking through a gallery not of paintings, but of living light. At last the path opened into a new clearing, this one broader and quieter than the first. In the center rose a pool of water so still it mirrored the sky above, though its surface glowed faintly from within. Around its edge grew blossoms larger than any Clara had yet seen, petals wide and curved, glowing white like luminous moons. Their fragrance was softer than the others, almost imperceptible, yet it carried a note that tugged at something deep inside her, a call, gentle and irresistible. She stepped closer, heart calm but expectant, sensing that this pool and its moon-like flowers were not just beautiful, but important, as though they held a secret waiting to be revealed. The mirror of Moonlight Clara approached the pool with careful steps, her shoes pressing softly into the glowing moss at its edge. The water shimmered faintly from within, not like any pond she had ever known, but more like liquid light, gathered and stilled. She knelt at its side, gazing into its luminous surface. At first, she saw only her reflection, pale and thoughtful under the moonlight. But as she leaned closer, the image rippled and shifted, dissolving into shapes that stirred her heart. It was as if the water remembered things she had forgotten, holding pieces of her past like treasures hidden beneath its surface. The ripples cleared, and Clara saw herself as a child once more, sitting cross-legged in the garden of her grandmother's cottage. In the vision, she held a flower in her small hands, a bloom that glowed faintly even then. She remembered this day. Her grandmother had told her that certain blossoms opened only at night, and she had stayed awake to see them. The memory carried warmth, laughter, the sound of a soft lullaby sung in a language she barely understood. Clara smiled faintly as tears touched her lashes, realizing the pool was showing her the truth. She had seen a piece of this magical garden before, even if she had not known it at the time. Yes, she stared deeper. The vision shifted again. Now she saw her grandmother standing at the forest's edge, turning back as though to call her forward. But before Clara could move, the image dissolved into a swirl of starlight. She reached out, fingertips brushing the glowing surface, and felt a shiver travel through her entire body. Not cold, but electric, like the touch of something alive. The great moonflowers around the pool responded instantly, their petals unfolding wider, bathing her in soft white light. For a moment, it felt as if the flowers themselves were breathing with her, exhaling light as she inhaled. Then the hum of the garden deepened, and the water in the pool began to swirl, glowing brighter. Clara pulled back slightly, but her gaze remained fixed on the churning light. From its depths rose new images, not memories this time, but possibilities. She saw herself walking deeper into the garden, past places she had yet to discover. She glimpsed great arches of flowering vines, glowing pathways beneath starlit skies, and something else, something she could not quite name, a presence waiting in the farthest reaches of this hidden place. The vision filled her with both awe and unease, as if the garden was offering not just beauty, but a journey. Clara sat back on her heels, her heart steady though her mind raced. She did not fully understand what she had seen, but she felt no fear. Instead, she felt chosen, as though the garden had pulled her here for a reason she could not yet see. The moonflowers bent gently toward her, their petals brushing close enough to stir the air around her shoulders, like a gesture of blessing. She whispered softly, "I'll follow," her words drifting across the still surface of the pool. At that, the water stilled once more, glowing faintly, as though it had heard her and approved. Beyond the pool, another faint path shimmered into being, guiding her deeper still. The path of starlit arches. Clara rose slowly from the pool's edge, her body tingling with the aftershocks of the vision. Behind her, the moonflowers swayed gently, their glow dimming as if satisfied that she had received what they meant to share. Before her, the faint path shimmered like scattered stardust on the moss, leading into the deeper folds of the garden. She hesitated only for a heartbeat before stepping forward, curiosity and quiet trust guiding her feet. With every step, the light beneath her shoes pulsed faintly, marking her progress into realms she had never known existed. The path soon wound between towering stems, so tall they arched above her head like columns in some ancient temple. Their blossoms glowed softly, each shaped like a bell of glass, translucent and luminous. As Clara walked beneath them, she felt as though she were entering a cathedral made not of stone, but of petals and starlight. The air was filled with a subtle resonance, the faint ringing of the flowers, like chimes stirred by a breeze too delicate for her skin to feel. Each note blended into the next, creating a music that filled the air and seemed to settle into her bones. She slowed her steps, awed by the living symphony that surrounded her. As the arches grew taller and denser, the light within them shifted. The soft silvers and whites gave way to deeper hues, blossoms in shades of indigo, violet, and sapphire, glowing as though carved from gemstones. The atmosphere grew more mysterious, less like a gentle welcome and more like a passage into sacred ground. Clara's breath came slower, and though she felt no fear, she sensed that she was moving closer to something vast, something the garden had kept hidden for those who dared to step beyond its outer edge. A quiet anticipation bloomed in her chest, stronger with each step at last. The arches opened into a long corridor of light, the path stretching ahead beneath a canopy of blossoms so thick they resembled a night sky filled with stars. Clara looked up in wonder, for some petals twinkled faintly, brightening and fading as though mimicking constellations. She recognized none of the shapes, yet they stirred a strange familiarity, as if they belonged to a sky she had once dreamed of long ago. She reached up, and for a moment, one of the twinkling blossoms dimmed and flared again in answer, as though acknowledging her. She smiled softly, her heart swelling with childlike wonder. When she reached the end of the starlit corridor, the path opened once more into a clearing, smaller than the others, but glowing with a deeper, richer light. In its center grew a tree unlike any she had ever seen. Its trunk shimmered with veins of silver, and from its branches hung flowers shaped like lanterns, each one glowing with a soft inner fire. At its roots, tiny blossoms sprouted in spirals, glowing like embers scattered across the ground. Clara froze, breath catching in her throat. The tree radiated a presence, ancient, watchful, and kind. She felt instantly that this was no ordinary flowered tree, but something greater, something that had perhaps been waiting for her far longer than she could imagine. The tree of whispering light Clara stood motionless at the edge of the clearing, her eyes fixed on the silver-veined tree. Its presence was so complete, so commanding, that she felt she might disturb it if she moved too quickly. The lantern-shaped blossoms hanging from its branches swayed faintly, though the air was still, and their glow painted the clearing in layers of soft gold and pearl. Around the base of the trunk, the spiraling blossoms pulsed gently, their light brightening and dimming as if in rhythm with a breath she could not hear. Clara swallowed softly, her throat tight, as though she had entered not just a garden but a sanctuary. She stepped forward slowly, her shoes brushing against the moss, each footfall sparking a faint shimmer. The closer she drew to the tree, the stronger the atmosphere became. It was not simply beauty. There was weight here, a depth that pressed into her chest like the hush of a cathedral. She reached out tentatively, her fingers hovering inches from the silver-veined bark. The surface glowed faintly, as if sensing her nearness, but she did not yet touch. Instead, she lowered her hand, bowing her head instinctively, as if some forgotten part of her already knew how to show respect in this place. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, one of the lantern blossoms high in the branches flickered and brightened. Another followed, then another, until the entire crown of the tree pulsed with light like a constellation waking into life. The sound came next, not a hum, but a voice woven from countless threads, soft as leaves rustling yet deep as distant thunder. Clara froze, breath caught in her throat, as the tree spoke not into her ears, but into her mind. Its voice was vast but kind, the way ocean waves might sound if they could comfort. "You have returned," the voice seemed to say, though the words were less spoken than felt. Clara's heart leapt, confusion stirring within her. Returned? She had never been here before, at least, not in any way she remembered. But the tree's presence was steady, patient, like someone welcoming home a child who had strayed too long. The lantern blossoms swayed more brightly now, each one flickering like a candle lit in greeting. Clara sank to her knees, not from fear, but from the sheer enormity of what she felt. The garden, the flowers, the visions, they had not been accidents. She was meant to be here. The silver-veined trunk glowed brighter, and from its roots spread a slow ripple of light across the clearing, passing beneath Clara like the embrace of unseen hands. It carried with it emotions she could not deny: remembrance, welcome, and the promise of something yet to come. She closed her eyes, pressing her palms into the glowing moss, and whispered, "I don't understand, but I'm listening." At that, The lantern blossoms above her chimed softly, as if struck by an unseen breeze, and their sound folded into a gentle melody. It was not yet a message she could decipher, but she knew the tree was beginning to share its secrets, one note at a time. The vision of roots and stars. Clara remained kneeling, her palms pressed into the moss as the silver-veined tree glowed brighter. The lantern blossoms swayed overhead, their chiming notes blending into a song that was neither entirely music nor entirely silence. She felt the sound moving through her like a tide, unbinding the knots of doubt and fear within her heart. Her breathing slowed, and soon the clearing seemed to dissolve into a haze of light. When she opened her eyes again, she was no longer looking at the tree, but at something vast, something woven into the air itself, a vision born from the garden's heart. The ground beneath her became transparent, and she saw roots stretching deep into the earth, roots that were not only wood and soil, but veins of silver light spreading endlessly downward, branching like rivers of stars. They pulsed softly, connecting far beyond what she could comprehend, as though the garden was part of something far larger, something that reached across the world itself. Clara's breath caught as she realized that every blossom, every glowing petal, was connected to this vast network, each one a spark in an endless constellation of life. She felt small, yet also deeply bound to it all, as though she had always been a part of this hidden pattern. Then the vision shifted upward, and she saw the sky above her, not the night she had walked beneath, but a greater sky filled with constellations that burned brighter than stars. Shapes emerged, spirals, arches, flowing streams of light, all mirroring the roots she had seen below. The heavens and the earth reflected each other, bound together in harmony. At the center of this reflection, she glimpsed a single flower larger than all the rest, its petals wide and luminous, cradling both starlight and shadow. She did not know what it was, only that it was important. A soft ache bloomed in her chest, as though her spirit recognized it though her mind did not. The vision narrowed, focusing now not on the vastness of stars, but on Clara herself. She saw a child, herself, once more standing in the forest with her grandmother, holding a night-blooming flower in her small hands. The flower glowed faintly, just as it had in her memory by the pool. But now she saw something she had not remembered before, her grandmother's hands resting over hers, guiding her to hold the blossom carefully, reverently. One day, you'll understand, the memory whispered, though the words had never been spoken aloud. Clara gasped, realizing her grandmother had always known of this place and had left her a seed of its secret long ago. When the vision faded, Clara found herself once more in the clearing, kneeling before the silver-veined tree. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her heart was steady, filled with both wonder and clarity. The tree's voice returned to her mind, soft and vast. You are of this garden, as it is of you. You were brought to remember, so that you may carry its light forward. The words were not entirely clear in meaning, but Clara felt their truth resonate in her chest. She bowed her head, whispering, I'll carry it. The lantern blossoms brightened in answer, and the clearing glowed as though the stars themselves had descended to bear witness. The garden's gift. Clara remained kneeling in the clearing, her heart still trembling from the vision, when the silver-veined tree's light softened. The lantern blossoms swayed one last time, their chiming fading into silence like the closing notes of a lullaby. The air was still again, calm and warm, yet Clara felt forever changed. She placed her palm flat upon the glowing moss and whispered her gratitude, knowing that no words could truly capture what the garden had shown her. The silver trunk glimmered faintly, and she felt an unspoken reply, not farewell, but blessing. She rose to her feet, the light around her dimming into a gentler glow. The path that had brought her to the tree shimmered once more, urging her back. Clara turned reluctantly, casting one last glance at the clearing. The ancient tree stood serene, its blossoms glowing like a constellation bound to earth, and for a moment she thought she saw a figure in the shimmer of its bark, a face, tender and kind, watching her go. Perhaps it was her grandmother's spirit, perhaps it was the garden itself. Either way, Clara felt no sadness now, only a deep, quiet peace as she retraced her steps. The garden responded to her passage. Blossoms bowed as she passed, petals drifting gently into her path like falling stars. The chiming of the bell-shaped flowers returned, soft and sweet, weaving her farewell into music. The glowing moss beneath her feet pulsed warmly, as if remembering her footsteps. She touched the flowers she had passed earlier, spiraling shells, lantern blooms, tiny candle-like buds, and each responded with light, as though acknowledging her presence one final time. What had once seemed impossibly magical now felt like family, a place she belonged to as much as it belonged to her. At last, she reached the garden's edge, where the arch of branches opened back to the quiet forest path. She paused, breathing deeply, reluctant to leave. Yet as she turned, she realized the glow of the garden was fading from sight, dissolving into the ordinary darkness of the woods. For a heartbeat, she felt a pang of loss, but then she noticed something. A single blossom had remained in her hand. It was small, pale, and luminous, glowing softly as if it had chosen to follow her. Clara cradled it gently, understanding now that the garden had not been left behind. It was with her, always, in memory and in light. When she returned to her grandmother's cottage, the night was quiet, the moon still glowing above. Clara placed the flower in a small bowl of water by the window, where it continued to glow faintly, casting soft light across the room. She lay down in her bed, the fragrance of blossoms still clinging to her hair, and closed her eyes. Sleep came swiftly, but not like an ending, more like a continuation, as though her dreams would carry her back along the paths of starlit arches and singing petals. And for the first time in many years, Clara slept peacefully, certain she was exactly where she was meant to be.